I'm your girl, Jonte, one third of the co-host from the podcast Healing Through Chaos. And today I'm joined by the wonderful Miss Merianne Drew, relationship and nutrition coach. And she's going to come along and tell you guys about what she does. And we're going to get into a little bit of discussion. How are you doing today, Miss Merianne?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for being here. Do you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've been coaching for about 11 years now. I started as a health and wellness coach and then as a nutritionist. But most recently, I have niched down, as they say, to relationship coaching. I noticed a trend in myself and my clients that chronic stress from a dysfunctional relationship really can affect their health negatively. And then vice versa, poor health does wreak havoc on relationships. So I saw that that was a really important tie, and that's what I deal with mostly with my clients now.
So, dealing with the food side and mental health, how does food impact our mental health and our emotional well-being?
Oh my gosh, so much. So just a couple of studies, if you're sciencey and nerdy like me, they did a study where they gave couples a voodoo doll representing their partner. I know. Most people, when they hear that, they're like, why would you do that? There's a study where they gave them a voodoo doll representing their partner, and then they said every time you feel irritated or annoyed with your partner, stick a pin in the doll. But they also measured each partner's glucose levels throughout the study. And they found that the partners that had the roller coaster glucose, the up and down spikes and dips of glucose, their voodoo doll representing their partner had a lot more pins than the people who had more steady glucose. And we also know that depression, bipolar disorder, treatment-resistant depression specifically, responds very well to the ketogenic and carnivore diet. So, overconsumption of carbs seems to be the Achilles heel for our whole society. And metabolic disorder, metabolic disease is at the heart of every physical disease that plagues us and mental disease. So like I said, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety is very tied to diet. And then also metabolic dysfunction is we're starting to see that it is the root cause of most cancers.
At a study on voodoo dolls and couples that turn into something like this. Now, I did hear you mention depression and anxiety. So, what specific nutrients or foods could support emotional regulation for such as depression and anxiety?
I don't say specifically what foods, but whole real foods.
Okay.
So we know for a fact that junk food causes depression. That's like settled. There's no debate on that anymore. We know that junk food causes depression. And so just eating real food, cooking at home, and limiting your starches to like a small portion of your plate and not a lot, right? We don't want glucose spikes. And then managing your glucose spikes, not just with your diet, but you can do that with your movement as well. And the idea is to keep your glucose levels rising steadily and then falling steadily and not spiking and dropping.
Okay.
That's what causes moodiness, and it also causes just agitation and hyperactivity in kids, and then it also creates metabolic disease.
So you guys, you heard that no junk foods, no chips, no candies, like baked potato chips that are offered in stores. Would those be a good substitute instead of your regular, or would you say stay away from those as well?
I would stay away from those because they usually have seed oils.
Okay.
And seed oils are in the top 4 of like worst things you can put in your body. They're very highly processed with toxic chemicals like hexane. They're not good for you. I'd rather potatoes if you want something that tastes like a potato chip or French fries. What we do is we just make our own French fries with beef tallow or ghee or butter, and you just fry it in that, and it tastes really good. In fact, a lot of restaurants now are jumping on the bandwagon to get away from seed oils, and they're going back to the original beef tallow is what people used to fry their food in. Fried chicken from the South, that was beef tallow. And a lot of people still use, bacon grease for a lot of their cooking, and it's a real whole food from a one source animal, and it's very close to the way that God made it. It didn't have to go through a bunch of changes like these seed oils.
Now I know I'm making bad decisions. So that includes no baked chips as well, you guys.
You just
Now,
look at the ends, like look at the seed oils.
so I was doing a little bit of research and I came across the gut brain connection. Would you mind sharing a little bit of insight into what that is and why it's so important for our mood and our mindsets?
Yeah, this is incredible, new information that is continually unfolding. We're learning so much more about our gut. So our gut is our small intestine and our large intestine. And mostly our large intestine, there's bacteria, trillions of bacteria that are good for us, that live in our colon. And our environment is so toxic. Our food environment, our just air and water, it's so toxic that those populations of bacteria are getting killed off. Also, the overuse of antibiotics for different infections, right? So we know that there's a tie between our gut and our brain, that people are calling it the second brain. So, for example, if you have an overgrowth of yeast in your intestines, that yeast thrives on what? Sugar, right?
Exactly.
And that yeast will actually communicate with your brain via the vagus nerve, which goes straight from your brain to your gut, to tell you to crave sugar and eat more sugar so it can thrive. Like
So,
hijack your brain.
wow. So does that relate to weight gain possibly?
Absolutely. So here's another really nerdy study. So there was they had twin women, right? They were twins. Okay, one was quite overweight and the other one was slim. And what they did is they took a sample of their gut bacteria and they put it into the intestines of two identical twin mice. Okay, didn't change anything else, didn't change their diet at all. And the one that got the bacteria from the fat lady got fat. And the one that got bacteria from the thin lady did not get fat. Amazing. What a difference. And we also know that, people who have autism, they have no bifidobacteria and no lactobacillus, which are two really important bacteria to help us break down like milk and other just like foods that we eat regularly, which is why this gut brain connection has become such a huge focus for so many people in the community that are trying to solve the mental and physical ailments of our time, because it does hold such a huge key. And just really quickly, another amazing study was there's two different ones. They bred mice and they had two different groups. One had gut bacteria that they populated with like yogurt and probiotics, and then the other group of mice had a sterile gut, so they didn't have any bacteria in their gut at all. And what they did is they exposed these mice to stress, which means they dunked them in water. So before they dunked them in the water, they measured all of their stress markers, so cortisol, adrenaline, and such, right? And then they exposed them to the water, brought them out, then they measured their cortisol levels and their adrenaline. And then they, over time, measured those levels, okay, as there was more time after they got out of the environment, the stressful environment. The mice that had bacteria in their gut, their levels of stress response came down way faster.
Mm-hmm.
So recovered way faster from something that happened in the past. You see what I'm getting at here? They recovered way faster from something that happened in the past that's not currently happening now than the mice that didn't have any bacteria in their gut. Another one, this blew me away. They had two groups of women, and they gave one group of women yogurt, which had probiotics, and then the other group yogurt that didn't have probiotics, just sterile yogurt. Okay. They showed these women a picture of a blank face, a face with a blank expression, just benign blank expression. The women who got the yogurt saw the expression as benign.
Wow.
The women who did not get the yogurt perceived the expression as threatening. It really does matter. They are the health of our gut and how we perceive our partner and their intentions and their tone and their facial expressions and their just everything about them.
So what I'm feeling is the gut brain connection is tied to possible um, intake of what you put inside of your body that affects you mentally.
Yes.
It's what I'm getting from it.
Yes.
knew what you eat could really affect how you think, how you respond to things. Like
Well, your brain is part of your body.
a lot of people would not think that. So for a person who, like myself, can sometimes feel a bit down on days or feel a bit of anxiety or may just feel a bit overwhelmed and may want to emotionally eat. How do you help those clients who emotionally eat or may struggle with food guilt or shame?
That's such a great question. The reason people emotionally eat, the reason they do it is because it works. It
Mm,
works short term. Okay, so it does give you a small um, mood boost because of the serotonin that gets created in your gut, which, by the way, most of the serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that your body has, created in your gut, not your brain. Okay, so you do get a lift in your mood, right? It also gives you a feeling of groundedness and fullness, especially if you're eating like contracted foods instead of expansive foods. But it's still lots of people will indulge in the advanced foods because they're high caloric, like sugar, give you that kind of euphoria feeling. But again, it's short lived, and then you end up feeling like physically ill especially if you overate, or especially if you ate junk, because it does make you feel like crap.
yeah.
Right? And so not only is your physiology, your body is feeling like crap, now you're feeling regret and guilt that you acted impulsively. But that's like I said, the reason people do it is because it works in the short term, and they don't have tools to replace that tool. So
Mhm.
you want to acknowledge that they're just using it as a coping tool, and and to try to take that away from them, you're leaving them without a coping tool, any effective mechanisms for dealing with emotional stress. And it really is just emotional stress, right? That's why we call it emotional eating. And so replace that with coping tools that actually work, not just in the short term, but in the long term.
Thanks for answering that because I quite often, when I'm stressed about a test or writing a paper, I will go and find the biggest Reese's king size bar I can find, and I eat all six of them, and sometimes I'm eating two at a time. So that's
That's a
12 cups.
that's a headache, big time. Ooh, ouch.
Yeah. So for a person like myself who does emotionally eat, I do try to diet as much as I possibly can. However, there are some things out there that are considered restrictive dieting. How do you feel about that? And how might it affect someone's mental and emotional well-being if they were to choose something like a restrictive diet?
I'm not a fan of restrictive. Well, let's define the restrictive dieting, right? Restrictive dieting sounds like a good idea if we're stopping ourselves from overeating. But if we're talking about restrictive dieting when we're not allowing us to eat adequate amounts of calories, where we're restricting adequacy, I'm not a fan of that, because then you're going to end up with those glucose spikes and dips. Somebody who's hypoglycemic, they're really irritable. That's where the term hangry came from, and the whole Snickers campaign for years and years, where somebody's hungry, they turn into a diva. It was a very effective advertising campaign, but reaching for a Snickers when you're hangry and you've got really low blood glucose is not a good idea, because it's going to spike, and then
Is
you're
that
going to crash dead. You're going to feel just as crappy and like a diva again. So I'm not a fan of restrictive dieting like that. Like I was saying earlier, you want to let your blood glucose climb slowly and then drop off slowly. There, a lot of people might be thinking, well, wait a second, what about fasting? Fasting has to be done very carefully. If your body is used to using carbs for fuel primarily, fasting is going to be really tough because your body isn't used to going for fat and protein for energy quickly. And so your blood sugar is going to crash. Okay, so that has to be done really carefully, and you can work up to that slowly. Fasting can be a really, really helpful thing if you do it right, which is why every holy book on the planet has mentioned fasting. If it wasn't important, they wouldn't put it in there. Um, but as far as like restrictive dieting, that just puts you on a mood swing pendulum like this, and then you're actually more susceptible to emotional eating, and especially at night, right, when you've been good all day and
that?
restricted yourself all day, and it's called ego depletion, where your willpower is just gone because you used up all your mental energy. You open up the freezer at 10 o'clock and you're like, I deserve that, and you believe it and you grab it, and that's where the overindulgence happens. So yeah, I'm not a fan of restrictive dieting at all. It's more a winning strategy is identifying as somebody who eats whole real food
Mhm.
adequately, not overeating, not undereating, and somebody who nourishes their body because they love their body, not dieting because they hate their body. That never works.
To do the restrictive dieting, and I actually gained weight versus lost weight. So,
Mm-hmm.
any of our viewers out there, if you want to know anybody that's actually tried a restrictive diet, I gained 6 more pounds than what I already was at the time I started the diet. Now, Merianne, I do tend to power walk and try to get in my cardio on a daily basis. Would those be considered would power walking be considered a physical activity that you would recommend for people that has stress with burnout, or would you recommend other activities?
Perfect activity because there's a lot of, for most people, there's less mental resistance to doing a walk because it feels easy. It seems easier than weightlifting, than running, than sprinting. It seems like not a lot of effort is put in, but actually, we know that a 20-minute walk right after you eat a meal really can reduce the glucose spike, even if you had a substantial amount of carbs in that meal. Just right after you're done eating, going for a 20-minute walk really makes it so it doesn't spike. It just goes like this. So it's really good for your metabolic health to take a walk after you eat. And power walking is even better. And it's low impact, so it's not hard on your joints.
Since we're talking about exercise, do you consider exercise as a therapy?
100%, it's the best therapy with
Why do you consider that?
with sunlight. So there isn't a single antidepressant that can beat exercise and sunlight combined. There's just, you can't. And the side effects of depression treatment as compared to the side effects of exercise, there's just no competition. The side effects of exercise is you have more energy, you have more strength, you look better, and you feel better, and you don't go dull in your emotions like a lot of these SSRIs, right? Um, Seriously, just sunlight, regular sunlight exposure, being out in nature, and exercising. There's no comparison, and that's what I say to people. If they come to me and they want coaching, I ask them, "Are you exercising regularly?" And if they're not, I'm not going to work with them because most things that they come to me with can be solved with exercise. And then once they're exercising, there's still a few things that we can solve together, and then we can work on it and actually get some traction on it.
Happy you mentioned about building the exercise routine with your clients and asking them about their exercise routine. Because quite often, sometimes we may want to exercise and get into shape, but we may not know the exact routine that we may need to try out or the areas that we may need to work on. So, how can you help someone build a sustainable fitness routine that supports their mental health and their emotional resilience?
That's a great question, too. You have to start with something that you don't have very much resistance to doing.
Okay.
Mental resistance is what I'm saying. Like, if you don't like playing tennis and your plan is to start playing tennis 3 days a week, you're not going to do it. So you have to pick something that you have the least resistance to doing. For some people, that's walking. For some people, that's yoga or just stretching, some kind of movement. For some people, that's playing with their kids. Whatever it is, whatever you don't have, like your brain giving you a bunch of excuses and objections, the least excuses and objections that your brain is giving you, do that. And then start small. Do it 1 day a week and do that consistently for 2 weeks and allow yourself to celebrate that you did that successfully. And then you build on that, do it for 2 weeks and do it for 2 days a week, or sorry, 2 days a week for 3 weeks, right? And just build slowly and let yourself celebrate progress no matter how small it seems. It's still progress. You're still doing more than you were doing.
As a person who few years ago was over 200 pounds and lost 50 pounds, I could be a person that can definitely attest to building that routine based off of where you are and what the movements and time frame that you would prefer to move in is better than actually going at a routine that someone else is forcing you to go in. So I lost a lot of weight just by being on my own on my own fitness journey by myself. So I know that this can be done, you guys. So Miss Drew is definitely giving out some great tips right now. Let's switch over to nutrition, if you don't mind. In your experience, how does nutrition play a role in self-esteem and how we show up in our relationships?
So how we treat ourselves is a reflection of how we think about ourselves. Okay. So
Read.
if we are feeding ourselves junk, it's reflecting how we feel about ourselves and that we deserve junk, right? We'll accept junk and not gourmet. So it really is twofold. You want to work on your diet at the same time you work on your mindset because they reinforce each other. Self-esteem, by the way, cannot be built very effectively, and people are going to push back against this.
Mm-hmm.
Self-esteem does not get built by talking to yourself in the mirror and telling yourself you're great. Self-esteem is built with receipts, but actually accomplishing things that are hard. That's where confidence and competence comes from, and self-esteem. You have evidence. You built a pile of evidence of doing things that were hard and overcoming those challenges and getting on the other side of them. That's how you quit.
I actually think that that was probably the greatest advice I've heard all year. You can stand in the mirror all day and tell yourself that you're beautiful, but if you don't go out there and show your beauty and prove that you're beautiful to yourself and the world, then it's kind of like you're kind of just pretty much just saying it to yourself over and over and over and over again. And then at one point, you're going to kind of start to feel like I'm just saying it to myself. But you have to actually have, as you said, the receipts. I'm a person who has started my own personal health journey, and I have lost a few family friends along the way on this personal journey. That could be due to just disagreements. So, do some people maintain healthy relationships while on a personal health journey, or what could they do to maintain that healthy relationship with their spouses, their family members, while also making sure to continue being kind to their mind and seeking their own mental health and exercises routines?
That's so key to being able to stay on that health journey and not going back to your old self because it's uncomfortable enough to be changing. And it's to understand when you're on a health journey, you're on an identity transformation journey because you're going from a person who identifies as an unhealthy, sedentary person to somebody to your actual identity is someone who feeds themselves alive food, healthy food, life affirming food, and someone who exercises as their identity not just as something that they do, but who they are, right? So you're changing your identity. And the people that you were around when you were the old identity, they're
Mm-hmm.
used to interacting with you in certain kind of relational patterns, okay? So you changing your behaviors will make that feel very uncomfortable. Not just your behaviors, but your mindset is going to change. And so the way you relate to them is going to change too. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
have self-esteem and more self-respect, which means you're going to have better boundaries and you're going to put up with less abuse from people or backhanded comments or passive aggressive behaviors. You're going to not put up with it. Comfortable for the people that they thought they knew who you were, so they're going to feel abandoned. They're going to have to feel grief, and they don't know how to deal with those feelings because they're not working with me. And so they're going to be struggling with those feelings, and people don't like change. We know this, so it's really uncomfortable. But as long as you stay the course and not, go back and give up on your own journey, they will get the picture. They'll figure it out. Like, okay, she really is a different person, and I can get to know a different person. I can learn new rules to this new game we're playing. Or they'll decide, I don't want to get to know this new person,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll just remove themselves, which can be lonely when you're in that transition between old you and new you.
Mm-hmm.
That can be really lonely because your own tribe doesn't fit you anymore, but you haven't really identified your new tribe and connected with them. So it can be really lonely, and just know that that's totally normal. It feels kind of like a cocoon stage, right? But you're going to blossom and get out of that cocoon. And as long as you don't stay in your house, you will be able to find people who can accept this new, healthier version of you, and not just accept it, support it and encourage it. And those are the healthy relationships that will be built upon your healthy self-esteem as the foundation, and your own self-respect is the foundation for the respect that happens between the two of you.
You were just discussing couples. Sometimes a person who decides to go on their own health journey can sometimes become a new person to their spouse. So, in your opinion, how can couples support each other and their wellness goals without becoming codependent or controlling the other spouse?
That's a really good question. So when your spouse is changing, if you if you identify your safety and security in the relationship being the same way that it always has been, then you're going to feel really, really threatened. But that's just because you perceive yourself, your own identity, as entangled with the relationship status, right?
Okay.
So it's being able to perceive yourself as an individual
Okay.
and not enmeshed with your partner so that they can be who they need to be without it being a threat to you. The support for your partner and their journey comes from that mindset, right? The support is behavior. Behavior flows from mindset and the thoughts that we have about ourselves. When a person's partner is changing for the better and they try to like sabotage those things and try to get them to stop doing that, a lot of times it's unconsciously done, but it's done because they feel threatened, because they have a belief that I'm not good enough for somebody of that high caliber to want to be with me. For somebody of high self-esteem would never choose me. And so I need to make sure that they stay on my perceived level and even dependent upon me. So a lot of people even unconsciously manipulate the situation so that the person who's trying to gain more self-esteem and get healthier, that they actually feel dependent upon the partner who has lower self-esteem, and and that is a way of controlling so that they won't leave, because the assumption is I would never be chosen by this person, and so of course they're going to leave once they get healthy. And that's not necessarily a correct assumption to make, that that's the belief that's informing their unconscious sort of sabotaging behaviors. Like, it really starts with, what am I believing about myself?
Mm-hmm. So, so in your opinion, when it comes to couples or personal relationships, say with our parents or our children, being a whole person, being whole within yourself, it plays a huge part, is
Yes.
what I'm. So, what does being whole mean to you, and how can people begin that personal journey with themselves?
Oh, this is such a loaded question because it gets to one of the great paradoxes of life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that paradox is we don't need anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but we need each other. The codependent mindset is I can't survive without this one person, this person. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This one person is the source of all my emotional security, all my emotional needs being met. And I need this person. We need people, but maybe you don't need that person. Whole means that you know who you are, you know why you've decided the things that you've decided, and you like your reasons. Okay, that's the definition of having your back, or the formula for having your own back. Okay, and then total integrity. Wholeness is integrity, right? Integrity means, like, if we talk about a bridge,
Mm-hmm.
if the materials don't match up with the construction, it's going to fall. If
Mm-hmm.
the constructions don't match the materials, it's not going to hold up, right? So if we talk about personal integrity, we need the insides to match the outsides. We need to not be hiding our true selves from people. People who hide their true selves from people have shame that they haven't dealt with. Okay, they have shame about who they are, right? Um, so you got to deal with that, and really, what I call it is healing all of your insecurities. Because when you have insecurities, you are vulnerable to bad actors. I mean, narcissists, type of very malignant people. There's not a lot of them. They're actually growing in number because of social media, but they're out there. They're out there. And that's why I agree with the mantra. A lot of people have the mantra, just assume the best in people.
Mm-hmm.
No, don't assume at all. Don't assume the worst. Don't assume the best. If you assume the best in a person and they have actual malignant intentions,
Mm-hmm.
you're in trouble. Healing into your insecurities and finding where you get stung if somebody says something about you, right? And healing that makes you what I call unfuckable. And then somebody tries to find those insecurities and push on them, and they can't find them, and they get frustrated, and they go find somebody else.
So, in your opinion, becoming whole means literally going within yourself and being able to depend upon self before having to depend on someone else.
Before, right? We want to be interdependent. We need people, so we need to depend on each other, but not from a place of insecurity and lack, from a place of wholeness and security. And like I said, healing your insecurities makes you whole.
So just for our viewers, I want to say, talk a little bit more about the wholeness. A little example, and you can tell me, would this be considered as a person becoming whole or a person becoming something else? She was married to the said man, but she does communicate with her coworkers. She does get along with her family on her side of the family, but she completely just isolates. Then one day she goes to court and is in a situation with her husband, and she completely just breaks down. Like, she just does not want to work anymore. She does not want to go out with friends anymore. And it's because she now is finally starting to feel the effects of her husband is leaving her. So now reflecting on, she's going to be alone. How would you help a person like her who, at first, when the divorce proceedings started, she was fine as long as she had her friends and her coworkers. But that moment in the courtroom where the judge is now finally telling you, hey, y'all about to be divorced, she's now losing the one person she might feel could be her best friend and is needed. How would you help a person like her, say, become whole, feel whole?
Well, everyone's always whole. We don't see it, and seeing is believing. Perception is reality. So, my job is to help people to unlearn all the things that are blocking them from being able to see their wholeness that's already been and always will be. But in her case, that strategy itself isn't necessarily wrong, but the reason she went about it was to avoid her feelings, avoid processing her feelings, and avoid facing reality. We know that mental health is facing reality. My definition of sanity is interacting with reality on reality's terms. And that strategy she was using was to avoid reality and avoid processing the feelings. And that's not a winning strategy, because just like what happened in court, those things are going to come up and bite you.
Yeah.
They hit you with reality, right? And so it's not a bad idea to, especially if it's particularly abusive, to temporarily get some distance so you can get some clarity when you're reflecting on the relationship. Distance is a great tool for getting clarity as long as we're doing the work of reflecting on the relationship. How did this happen? How did I participate in this? How did I allow this kind of behavior and continue allowing this kind of behavior? And how can I not do that again? That's the work that, when you do that and then you show up in court, you can be cool as a cucumber.
So for a person like her, what daily habits would you recommend for her to maintain her inner peace and just maybe her overall well-being in the process, or any type of stressful process?
Well, first of all, self-care, and that's not bubble baths and indulging in chocolate. Exercise, okay, eating healthy food, that is journaling, meditation or yoga, some kind of prayer ritual, and then using the services of somebody like a therapist or a coach, or a very good, well-balanced, grounded in reality friend who isn't afraid of emotions and who has the intestinal fortitude to call you out on your delusions or your self-deceptions that you engage in. That's a real friend. So somebody who's going to see you're engaging in self-deception and not call it out is not a friend. And yeah, really use that, because there isn't a single person out there who can really see themselves objectively. We're having subjective experience. That's why we're here, right? So, but it is very useful to be able to see ourselves objectively. And that's why relationship is the temple of God, where we evolve. This is where we grow and become more aware of what and who we are, and heal from and let go of all the things that we are not, that we've picked up along the way.
Definitely would want to incorporate some self-care into there, whether it's journaling, getting outside into nature, going for walks, maybe just not, as you said, not indulging in chocolate and junk food. Some people, include myself, cooking has become a stress reliever for myself. So maybe just her cooking as well could be something that she can incorporate into her daily life.
Creative outlet. So any way that we are being creative. Can, I mean, when I was in one of my lowest points, gardening really helped me because not only was I nurturing something, being creative, but I'm getting into the soil and getting that ion exchange for the positive, for positive energy and supported my mental health. But also I started painting. And I was not good at it, like inherently. And I did a lot of tutorials, so I was copying the person that was teaching on YouTube. But it really was so therapeutic for, putting together the pieces of my shattered mental health. Sorry.
And from my standpoint, I love writing. So I've actually released several books. So that's my way of releasing as well. So there are different techniques you guys can use and different types of skills to incorporate into your self-care. For these last few questions, Miss Drew, I want to get your perspective as the person. So how do you personally yourself balance nutrition, movement, and your relationships and your mindset in your life?
That's always a constant readjustment practice. So a good analogy is, a pilot that's flying a plane from point A to point B. Most of the time that they're going from point to point B, they're off course. So how do they get there? Constantly making tiny minor adjustments. And that's life. If you think you're going to get to a point where you don't have to be constantly reassessing and readjusting, making minor adjustments, you're in a delusion, because that's not real. I mean, everything's changing all the time. My kids are growing. They're becoming different people so fast, right? My husband is into a different person every day. I'm changing into a different person every day. I'm aging, and there's no stopping that, right? Just accepting that we can get grounded in reality from moment to moment, right? And assess what's going on around us from moment to moment and adjust as needed. So sometimes that means I take a whole day off and watch Fleabag. Trashy TV, right? That means I'm working really hard towards my goals, and hopefully that's coinciding in the right part of my menstrual cycle. Knowing and tracking, if you're a woman, tracking your menstrual cycle so that you're doing your most productive work at the right time in your cycle and you're resting at the right time of your cycle, that avoids a lot of guilt and shame about, oh, I shouldn't be so lazy. No, sometimes you need to just not do anything and just be. So, and that means keeping only ingredients in the house, like keeping snacks out of the house. We don't need snacks. If you want a snack, you can make one, right? Or you can go out for a special date with your kid, right? And it feels really special for them. And you get an ice cream, and you just get one ice cream instead of a tub of ice cream sitting in the freezer calling your name all day. Keep that stuff out of the house. And I keep ingredients. So if you want cake, you're baking it from scratch, right? And you're cleaning it up.
Answer the next question with establishing boundaries when it comes to food, which I'm still learning. So I will phrase the question and ask you, how can a person set boundaries to where they're not feeling like they're punishing themselves almost?
Okay, so a lot of people punish themselves because they think they're bad. So that's a mindset thing, right? And a lot of the dieting culture is, I was bad, so I have to exercise to make up for the bad choice I made. And there's no bad choices and good choices. It's just health supportive and not health supportive, right? But as far as, for me, what has really worked and what has worked for my clients is really getting in tune with your body. A lot of people have left their body and they're up in their mind all the time. And so they're not even making a connection between, I have a tummy ache right now. Why did that happen? Oh, because I had that junk food, right? They're not even seeing that connection. And when they can, really get in tune with their body and see that this created this result, then it's like, do I deserve to feel bad? And this is the self-esteem thing again. Do I deserve to feel like crap? And that's really at the heart of why a lot of people shovel crap into their face. they think that they deserve it, right? They haven't forgiven themselves for who they are, for being a human being who makes mistakes. They have to practice grace. And grace really is the salvation from that. And not asking grace of anybody else, asking grace of yourself.
You definitely hit that one on the head. So you guys, as you heard from the expert, there's no such thing as a bad choice, because quite often I think the terms we use can have a negative effect on our mental health as well. So that me sounds a little bit better than just saying you're making a bad decision, because
Right. We're,
the way it feels like you're punishing yourself and you're sentencing yourself off to something, and you're not necessarily, you just made a mistake.
it's just like if you're steeped in the dogma of sin and punishment, right? Crime and
Mhm.
punishment, that will definitely carry on to what you believe you should be treating yourself as according to something that you did. And there are some sort of dogmas that say that, like you said, sin is just a mistake. You just missed the mark. It's not
Exactly.
something that it needs to be punished. It's something that needs to be corrected. Only come from a place that is thinking from a higher plane than the choice, than the thinking that created the choice that we made.
I how you said that, because as a person who did battle with being overweight and did start my own health journey and went on it by myself with just myself, no one else, now starting to gain weight back. So in a few months, we'll see where I'm at with that.
Yeah, and it's just really being in tune with your body and seeing how it responds to the food that you're choosing. And then like I think this is an important thing to say. When your emotions are low, okay? So guilt and shame are the lowest vibrations that we can have. Okay? They're like this close to death. Okay. So when we're vibrating that low, our behavior will flow from that emotional state, which will be low behavior. When we're vibrating high, when we're emoting high, our behavior will flow from that, which is high behavior. But, right, if you're beating yourself up for something that happened in the past, you can only stay where you were in the past because you got the guilt and the shame keeping you there.
I only have a few more minutes left, and you have been amazing. I have two more questions. One is just your personal information, and one more question about what you do on your daily basis. And that question is, if you're listening to someone who feels broken or overwhelmed, what's the first step they can take right now towards becoming a whole person or getting themselves into the right mindsets?
First thing is go outside and take a walk. Get out in the sun and go with a friend. That first time, it feels like impossible to do that. And if that feels like too much, get up and brush your teeth. Get up out of bed and brush your teeth and call that a win.
Awesome.
Seriously, it's a win. And
Awesome.
and, and if brushing your teeth feels easy, let's take a shower. Taking a shower is a great mental reset.
Those things don't require you taking a bath, brushing your teeth, making your bed, cleaning your room. Those things do not require you to have to make communication with anyone. It just requires you to say, hey, self, I want to do something today that's productive, and I want to feel good about doing it. And even if it's just brushing your teeth or washing your face, it literally helps. Every little thing helps, you guys. Well, Merianne, our time is running short, and I do want to make sure before we end that you are able to tell everyone how to reach you. So, how can we reach Miss Drew if we need your services?
Great. Well, you can go to my website, meriannedrew.com. My name is spelled a little weird, so I'll spell it for you. meriannedrew.com. And there you can schedule a free discovery call. This is a consultation where you get to talk about what's going on with you, and I can help you get more clarity on what's going on, why it's happening, and what to do about it. So that's my gift to everyone, is the gift of clarity on that appointment. And then I do have some courses that are in the works. They're coming slowly but surely, but they're coming. You can also find me on Instagram, Merianne Drew Coaching. You can find me on Facebook, Merianne Drew Coaching. There's lots of free content. I'm also on TikTok, Merianne Drew. And then you can read my blog at my website. There's lots of really good, helpful relationship tips on my blog. So there's lots of free content already. But if you want to work with me personally, the first step is to have a consultation.
Awesome. Well, you guys, I will leave that down in the description box, all of her information for you guys to check out her if you guys need sources. And I just want to thank you again, Miss Drew, for taking out the time for
Okay?
speaking with us today, and our viewers, and all get back healthy, come back to our relationships and make them healthy again. Thank you again, Miss Drew.
Thank you for having me.
And see you guys next time.